All right. Thank you guys. Oh, I see Tony. He's just wandering around the office. Hi guys. I'm with the girls over there. Hey guys, it's Linda with Security National Mortgage, and thank you so much for coming to my financial literacy class 101. Hey Tony, come on in. I'm doing a live stream right now. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming to my Credit Financial 101 class. And what we're going to be talking about are a few things. And the whole purpose of this is to create the right mindset. So many of us are groomed into not talking about this, right? Encouraging. And so I want you guys to start thinking about how credit is one big giant trust system. It allows somebody such as myself as a mortgage lender to know more about you without actually knowing about you, right? How do I justify giving you a loan for hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a home without knowing whether or not you will pay it back? Well, our system that we look to is your past history of utilizing credit. And so that tells somebody like me what your likelihood of borrowing money back, or what if you were to borrow money, the likelihood that you would be paying it back. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to talk about what is credit, and then why is it important? We're going to talk about how to establish, maintain, and build it. I'll give you a couple tips and tricks, a few resources, go over a couple frequently asked questions, and then we're going to open it up to ask questions, because I truly believe that people don't apply this to their lives unless it applies to their life, right? Whenever I do these classes, people will sit there and just think of a couple questions. Well, wait, hold on, but my credit, this happened to me, why this? So when it applies to you, you're more likely to understand it. So I like to leave a bigger portion of this for the open conversation and questions. So let's talk about what is credit. Credit is money that you are borrowing from a financial institution. So that could be a bank, a lender, payday loan places, and then you're going to repay it with interest. So interest is going to be how much you're paying the financial institution for that money. So they give you the money, you're going to pay that money back, but you're going to pay a little bit on top of that directly to whoever allowed you to borrow that money, right? So then your credit score, and because that word credit gets thrown around quite a bit, it's very difficult to understand what exactly it is. So your credit score is the number that we use to measure your credit worthiness. The higher that number tells us as lenders, you borrowed money, you pay it back on time as agreed. The more often you do that, the higher the score. And then your credit limit is going to be how much the financial institution is going to let you borrow. How much do they trust you with? And that could be overall. You could have one credit card that is giving you a $10,000 limit. Then you go to and then you go to buy a car, you buy a $15,000 car. That's a $15,000 credit limit.
Are we allowed to ask questions now at the end?
You can ask questions, yeah.
Okay, so what if anyone can put things on your credit, right? That's not warranted. What happens then?
You mean, so like you're talking about secured and unsecured?
Whatever they put on your credit, which is not even validated for you.
So okay. So what you're saying is, if somebody were to report something that was incorrect on your credit report,
correct.
So that would be your consumer right to dispute that information. So the question is that if somebody reports something on your credit report that you end up seeing that's not correct, that you can 100%, it is your consumer right to dispute any erroneous information on your report.
And if they don't take it off, then what happens?
Well, that's not the point of this class because I have no idea.
Right.
When you dispute incorrect information on the credit report, it depends. Some people go directly, let's say, for example, a credit card company reported a link. You don't really go to the credit card company and say, hey, I made that on time. What you do is you report it to the bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. They're the ones who are reporting. The credit card company or the financial institution is reporting it to the bureaus, and the bureaus are the ones who show you your credit report. So you dispute it with them. It is their job to go back to that financial institution who reported it incorrectly and say, hey, Tony is saying that this isn't correct. It is up to you to prove to us that it is.
Right.
And if they can prove it, it stays. If they can't prove it, and this is where credit restoration companies kind of come in because they kind of use these laws. And I don't want to get it too convoluted, but this is when they start to use those laws to help you dispute information on your credit report.
Thank you.
They send a letter saying you need to verify that this is correct. They have 30 days. They don't respond. They send another letter. They have 30 days. They do this 3 times over the course of 90 days. And this is a tactic that these credit restoration companies use. They're using the laws for you.
Right.
But the kicker is if they send those letters, so if they send the letter 3 times over a 90-day time frame and they can't prove it or they don't respond, by law, they have to remove that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, and so your credit report is exactly that. It's a record of your borrowing and paying back history for 7 years. And this is where you can find all of your trade lines, lates, payments made on time, and then your utilization and score. So that report kind of gives you a summary of where you're at financially for the past 7 years. And I want to emphasize, credit is not free money. This is where a lot of people, I feel like, kind of get excited, right? Credit card is going to give you a $5,000 limit. That doesn't mean they're giving you $5,000 to spend and you never have to pay it back. You do have to pay it back with interest, with money on top.
When I was in college and they told me that, all of that other part that you said that was the most important part of them giving me whatever credit limit they gave me, never entered my ears.
Of course
I
not,
was just
right?
like, what? How much do I have here?
No one knows.
That
I was
was
like,
that was
oh.
extra money you otherwise would not have had,
Yeah.
right? And so you get all
So
excited,
not
you
fair.
start spending it. So in continuing, what is credit? Credit is going to be based on a number system. So this goes from 300 to 850, depending on the bureaus, right? Obviously, the higher the score, the better your credit. The lower the score, not so great. And then, so what exactly affects your credit? Huge on this. It is not equal, and there's an algorithm. There's no one sitting back calculating your credit score individually. So that's why you'll see these minor fluctuations, or sometimes, I would do nothing on my credit. Everything is exactly the same and it would have dropped 18 points. That really happened last month, and I was like, but why? Well, what happened? Like the wind just, so it's an algorithm. Nobody quite knows exactly what the formula is. The theory is that if you know it, you can manipulate it, right? But in general, payment history is huge. Think of it this way. If you were to borrow money, like let's say, Ernesto, I come to you and I say, hey buddy, I need $500 to float me to the next pay period. You think you can help me out? You give me the $500, next pay period comes around, you've got a family to feed. You've got things and bills to do pay as well. And I'm like, hey, I know I said I was gonna pay you the next pay period, but next one, okay? I just don't have enough. That trust in us, you're never gonna let me borrow money again.
Yeah.
Because it's a giant trust system. If I borrow money from you and I tell you I'm going to pay you back as agreed at a certain time and you don't, that hurts that trust system a whole lot more than anything else. Amount owed is going to be the second biggest impact to your credit. Why? Because if, let's say, we're gonna use that same example, my buddy Ernesto over there in the corner has all he has after paying all his bills at $500. And I say, hey, can I borrow that $500? I really need it to pay my rent. But he knows that my rent is only $300. Like, do you really need that $500, or do you need the full $300 because your rent is only $300? Well, for me to feed myself as well, a little extra to get me to the next pay period, right?
You might need to go out.
You might need to go out, whatever, party, go to the bar, who knows? But if he has the $500 to let me borrow, but I don't really need the whole $500, amount owed is going to have a big part of that, right? Because the more you're able to borrow and the more you maximize it, you're going to be a higher risk. If that kind of makes any sense.
Yes.
Length of credit is same scenario. If I've only ever known Ernesto for a month, and I'll be like, hey, buddy, can I borrow $500? He's going to be less likely to let me borrow it, right? Because he doesn't know me.
Exactly.
Now,
I'm just donating $500.
exactly. You have no idea if I'm paying him back, what my financial situation is. But if I've known him for years and every once in a while I borrow some money from him, but I've paid him back on time as agreed and my word is good, then yeah, he might be more willing to let me borrow the money because now he knows me. So length of credit history is going to be huge because it builds that trust over time. This is why people who are just kind of starting out with credit have kind of a harder time to get their credit up. They may be only if you've only just opened a credit card last month, your score is not going to skyrocket to 750 because you haven't had that time frame for the trust to be built. Credit increase and types of credit are going to be the least impactful. They do impact a little bit. Inquiries are really just inquiries. You are asking for what your borrowing potential is. Doesn't mean that you did it. Doesn't mean that you opened any accounts. Types of credit, we're going to go into that in our next slide. The different types of credit that I would want you guys to be aware of. All right, so we have installment loans. Those are going to be loans where you're making equal payments until you pay it off. So for example, auto loans, mortgages, personal loans, student loan types are going to be installment loans. But if you were to buy a car for $10,000 and the term was 5 years, you pay it back completely after 5 years. It's a $10,000 car. So with interest over the 5 years, you would pay a total of $2,000 in interest. So how they calculate that is going to be $12,000 total. Over 60 months, you divide that. And so now your payments are going to be $200 a month. So you're going to do $200 a month for 60 months, which is 5 years. And by then you would have paid off the auto loan and the interest that you would have taken out. So it's equal payments until it's all done, divided over the course of time that you've agreed to borrow it. Revolving credit is when you're given a credit limit, and then as you are borrowing it, paying it back, you're getting that limit back. So it's constantly revolving. So you credit limit of $1,000, you spend $500 for the month, you still have $500 left. But then at the end of the month, you pay back that $500. Now you get that $1,000 back. So it's constantly revolving. Next one is going to be secured debt. Secured debt is going to be backed by collateral. So a house, a car, pawn shops are a perfect example of secured debt. You're giving them something, they're going to hold it, and if you pay it back, then you get your item back, your collateral back. If not, they take it and they resell it, right? So it's backed by something. Unsecured debt is something that they can't take back, really, if you don't pay it back. So this is going to be a big example of credit cards. I can go to the restaurant, put it on my credit card, but if I don't pay that credit card bill, what are they going to do?
So-
Nothing. You can't come back and take my food out of my belly.
But they can close your credit card.
They can, but the credit itself is not backed by anything. It's not backed by any type of collateral. So you're going to hear me say this quite a bit. Interest is how the lender measures risk. Okay. So when different credits, trade lines have different credit interest rates, it's measured by the risk. And so this is kind of universal, whether it's a credit card, a car loan, a mortgage, whatever. Interest is how the lender is going to measure risk. And the reason why I say that is because there's a huge difference between secured and unsecured. That's why secured debts tend to have lower interest rates. I just looked on my credit card on Friday just because I was curious what my credit, with the interest rates dropping, I was curious if they dropped my interest rate. My interest rate on my credit card is 26%.
I feel your pain. Don't feel bad.
No, it could be 100% for all I care. I don't carry balances on mine, so we'll talk about that one later on. I don't carry balance, so they can charge me 100% interest, which is illegal, for all they want. I don't carry a balance, but credit cards are going to tend to have a higher interest rate because it's unsecured. Mortgage rates are sitting anywhere from the high fives to the low sevens right now. Lower interest rate. Car loans, I actually don't know what car loan interest rates are right now. I can't imagine that they're too good, but they're definitely not 26%.
So, for example, you touched on it, and this is piggybacking on what you said. They charge the period of time. They look at the interest they're going to charge you for that period of time. Let's say 3 years, for example. How can they do that if, say, the interest rate fluctuates? So how can they set? Are they doing an average interest rate or what?
No, nope. Whenever you take out that debt, the time that you borrowed that money
Oh, I see.
is
Okay.
the interest rate that
So
you're,
it
and so
can-
that's going to be the difference between fixed and adjustable rates,
Right.
right?
It can, you borrow at 8%, it can go down to 2%, but you're still paying 8%.
Right, in which case you want to go maybe look into
Refinance,
refinancing.
right.
And that's why back in 2020, 2021, when the rates were very low, everybody made a mad dash to refinance their homes because
right.
whatever their interest rate was when they had bought the home,
Mhm.
that doesn't change. Those are the loan terms. That is what you agreed to. And it does not change unless you go to refinance it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then this is also why secured debt, and like we just said earlier, will generally have a lower interest rate in comparison to the unsecured debt. So why is credit important? Well, it's important because it's going to be used for large purchases where you otherwise wouldn't have all of the money or could use the money for something else. A $10,000, you may have $10,000 for a car to buy out outright in cash, or you can put a down payment on and use the money for something else and finance the rest. I don't know about you. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars lying around to buy a house in cash.
Not yet.
So not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Not
But
yet.
I'm happy to put the 5% down payment of a $400,000 home versus the actual $400,000. And it's going to free up money to make other purchases in life that you need. Credit is important for that reason. When you're borrowing money, it's going to tell lenders, institutions, banks, employers, landlords that you're good for the money. And we're going to go into why employers and landlords are important, because you're not really borrowing money from them. We're going to go into that in another slide.
Okay.
Ooh, and possibly a significant other. This one is a weird one, but the whole purpose of this conversation piece is to have this conversation on why credit would be important. Why would a significant other, someone that you're dating, want to know what your credit score is? Weird, but we'll talk about that. So the better your credit and credit score, the cheaper it will be for you to borrow money. Now, really fast, let's unpack that. What does that mean? When your credit and credit score is better, we'll go back to interest rate is how the lender measures risk, right? So the higher the credit, they've deemed you more worthy, credit worthy, more likely to pay back that money. So they're going to give you a better interest rate versus somebody who has a history, kind of a rocky history of paying back a loan. So I'm going to use the example of me and Ernesto, right? I borrowed $500 from him. I was late that one time because I went to the bar instead of putting the money aside to pay him.
And didn't invite me.
And it didn't invite him.
Me too.
But I do pay him back. I was just a little bit late. I pay him back with interest. Here's $25 to buy your lovely wife some flowers. Thank you for the $500. Next time comes around. Hey Ernesto, I've got to borrow another $500. You think you can float me to my next pay period? In his head, it's like, well, I made $25 last time. I really didn't have to do anything other than give her the money. But she didn't really pay me back on time. So this time, I'll give you the $500 till next pay period, but I want $50 this time because you didn't pay me back on time last time, and my daughter's dance class bill was due, and I was late on that because you didn't pay me back on time. So now I want $50, and if you're late again, I want another $20 on top of that for each day that you're late. So again, the interest rate is how the lender measures your risk. If you have a low credit score, it kind of indicates that you didn't really pay your bills on time or for whatever reason. They're going to charge you a higher interest rate. They're not going to not let you borrow the money. These banks, institutions, that's what they're in the business of, loaning money.
Close them up.
Exactly. No, we need them.
But how do they charge you is going to depend on what your credit score and your history of paying all of that money back. And so interest is what you pay for the money. Again, I repeat this. Interest rate is how the lender measures risk on what they want to make off of you. The higher the risk, the higher the rate.
So don't go in a suit to borrow money. Wink, wink.
Why?
You
They
would
might
get
think
more
they
money
might
than
think
the
you're rich.
I was gonna
They
say-
might think you're rich. Yeah.
Well, see, that is the old school way of thinking. Walking into a bank and looking all nice, right? And then they'll just give you money. I get people doing that all the time. They're just like, no, I'm good for it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, yeah, we don't do anything by word of mouth or appearance anymore. Right. This is what this system is for.
Yeah.
Don't tell me, show me. All right, so how do you establish, build, and maintain it? Establishing it, if you've never had credit before, somebody who is younger, 18, 19, just kind of getting started with building credit, or if you've never had it before, how do they measure your credit worthiness if you've never really had it before, right? It's actually easier to build it on nothing than it is to build it back up from bad credit. But you would get started with a secured credit card. This is my number one way, just because a secured credit card, remember we go back to talking about secured and unsecured debt.
Yeah.
Credit cards are unsecured. Unless you have a secured credit card, which simply means that if you have a $500 limit on your credit card, you're gonna put a deposit of $500. Now it is backed by collateral. It is backed by $500 that they are holding, and you use that credit card as usual. Spend money, pay it back. Spend money, pay it back. But if you miss that one payment, they're going to take from that $500 to pay what you missed. So now it is more secure than something not backed by anything else.
Gotcha.
And so this is useful for anybody who is rebuilding their credit first and foremost, and also we call them ghosts, right? It's people who don't have a credit score or credit history. You can apply for a credit card with your bank. Because you already have a financial relationship with that bank, it's maybe a little bit easier for you to get a credit card because they see that you have a job. Money comes in out of it, you're using your debit card, like you don't overdraft too often. So it may be easier than if you were just to apply to somebody who knows nothing about you. You can apply for a starter credit card. Those are going to be a little bit more high risk, but they're more
secured ones.
What
Those
was
are the
that?
secured ones.
No. Secured could be a starter credit card, or it could just be like, so I know Capital One, they have kind of like the worst terms.
Sure.
But they're more loose on the criteria.
So if you applying for a credit card, do they look at your balance in the bank? Does it help if you have a few million in the bank?
I mean, I'm sure it does. That's not like I don't know the actual like nuances of how they operate or how they think.
Gotcha.
Every bank is going to be a little bit different, right? We at Security National Mortgage are going to look at mortgages and your qualifications a little bit differently from the next lender or the next lender. So everybody is going to have their own kind of parameters, or they call it appetite for risk. Appetite for risk.
I know somebody was really creative with that title.
Yeah, right. So another way you can establish credit is self-reporting utilities. This has actually gotten more and more popular in the last couple of years. You don't have to report utilities, but it is a bill that you pay on time. So if you're self-reporting it on your credit report, it's going to help build that credit score because you don't really have to report it. Utilities don't get reported.
Right.
And then the next one would be you can set up a joint account or co-sign on a loan with someone. I put that one on there.
Linda, you said you'd co-sign for me.
Right? Yeah. Been burned on that one. If you don't necessarily trust the person, I've seen it happen with parents. Parents will co-sign for a car with a child. The child doesn't make a payment. Both individuals' credit is hurt. That one is a huge risk that I don't know if I would necessarily advocate for, but it is an option, so I have to put it up there. And you being added on someone's a trusted individual's credit card as an authorized user. Again, this one, I ask that my viewers tread with caution. People think that just because you get added to somebody's credit card, your credit score automatically goes up. No, what you're doing is you're sharing credit history. Now, I have pretty good history of paying my credit cards, well, in recent history. So when if I were to add one of my nieces or nephews to my credit card as an authorized user, they're piggybacking on my good utilization.
I was just about to ask that.
But what happens when I make a late payment?
It affects them too.
It affects them too.
Yeah,
So-
because I have little ones. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean
Go
to
ahead.
cut you
No,
off.
you're
I
not.
was gonna say, because I have little ones, and I hear that it's a good thing to establish their credit. And I was like, so do I put a credit card in their name and just use it for utilization or whatever? Yeah.
You could, but here's the thing, because your oldest is 7.
Don't they have to be 18?
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
7. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
They're going to be 18 though, right?
They don't necessarily have to be
It
18.
depends on the company. Some company let you like at 11 or 10, and some companies don't, because I have looked into it.
Right. So my question would be, if the credit reports go back 7 years, I don't know what the purpose of you starting them now would be.
Got it.
Because your good history today would fall off by the time your oldest is 14.
Just 7 days, basically.
7 years.
7 years. I mean.
Yeah, correct. So credit reports, only good or bad, only go back 7 years. I think bankruptcy standard report for 10 years.
It used to be 7 though.
It used to be 7. So I have to double check on that one.
And also when someone puts something on your credit, they like update it every month, and that's illegal too. You know, like say for example, like they can't update it and keep it as brand new every month. That doesn't work.
We'll have to sidebar on that
Let's
one.
sidebar.
It stays on your report from the last activity. So if you have a 5-year-old collection and you called to settle it and you guys don't come to an agreement, that
Right.
7-year time clock starts over.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
So it's 7 years from the last activity. And then, so to go back to the individual, the trusted individual's authorized user account, it has to be a trusted person. Like I said, just because you add somebody to your credit report, and I see this all the time in my line of work, I'm like, you just remove yourself from this, like this person is late all the time, and you are added to their credit report, like you're not doing anything good or bad to your credit, but they are hurting you because of their negligent utilization of their credit, which is you're mirroring. So to build your credit, I would recommend that you use your credit as often as possible. Credit is just money that you borrow and pay it back on time. So by using your credit card, I would recommend don't use a credit card just to use it. Start adding everything you can to it, but you buy groceries anyways. You pay for gas anyways. You would have otherwise used cash or a debit card for.
Right.
Put it on your credit card and pay it off in full every month. The point of this class, because I get a lot of slack for this, and everyone's like, you're teaching people to get into credit card debt. No, I'm teaching people how to use credit, but use it responsibly.
And pay it off before you get an interest rate on it.
Correct.
Which is the correct way of using it.
Yep.
And not just that, you get the benefit. A lot of credit cards nowadays have a huge rewards program, have free money, miles, whatever it is that their rewards are that you would never get if you didn't use the credit card.
Right. But if you do carry that balance, those rewards, you're paying for it.
Oh, you're more than paying for it.
You're more like, so for example, for me, I'm what they call a credit card deadbeat. Credit card companies hate me. They can charge me whatever they want in interest rate. I don't pay it because I pay my balances off in full every month.
So question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We need to know what day, from what I understand, what day they put it on your credit, right? And also, because on a credit card, you're not supposed to use more than 30% or 33%.
Right. So what they do is they take a snapshot. Nobody knows when they take that snapshot. Every credit card company, every lender is going to be different on when nobody sits there and looks at what's Tony's balance doing today.
Right.
They take a snapshot of where you're at, and that's what gets reported.
I see.
And so for me, I think I have kind of narrowed down when that time frame is. I only have 2 credit cards. That's all I have on my credit report. And so my due date is on the 25th, and I paid off in full every month.
So,
But then a couple of days later, because I'm constantly using my card, right? Like I don't stop just because my balance was due.
Right.
So I usually get a little bit carried over. Just because I feel like they take a snapshot maybe like a couple of days afterwards, but that's because I'm conscientious of it. In reality, this doesn't need to take up that much rent in your head. It really doesn't. Once you've kind of established the good habits, it becomes like hygiene.
Yeah.
It just becomes natural. So I know a lot of people stress like 10%, 30% utilization. If you're paying your balances off in full every month, or at least most of it, then you should be in good shape. And so we go into later down in the slides on how to monitor your credit, because that's what's super important as well. And that's kind of by using these tools of understanding where my credit is at, I can understand what's being reported. Because I was like, I know I paid off in full, and that's when my credit score goes up, or like when it dropped 18 points, I think like $400 got reported to the bureau. And so my utilization skyrocketed because usually my utilization is like $12, $15, you know? Setting automatic payments for at least the minimum so you're never late. Huge. Because this has actually saved me a couple times. I could set it to pay it off in full. I'm not always confident I have enough money in my checking account. Sometimes I need to move money around. I don't keep a lot of money in my checking account. I keep just enough to survive. Everything else goes into a high yield savings account because I want that naked interest while I'm not using it.
No, I was gonna say, don't say you put it under your mattress. We're
We're live streaming, but I wish somebody would come to my house.
Yeah, mine's in the mattress, in the pillow.
But I went on vacation about a year or so, for my birthday about a year ago, and I forgot, because I usually, it's set for the minimum payment, but I go in there and I manually pay off everything in full. Well, I forgot for a couple of days. And so it paid off, the minimum was like $25, $35, and that's usually what your what your late fee is.
Mm-hmm.
If you are late, if you're late even by a minute, East Coast time, not West Coast time or Pacific Standard or Mountain, it is East Coast time. So as soon as it hits 11:59 over there, right into midnight on the East Coast, and it's, what is it? What are we? 3 hours?
3 hours.
We're 3 hours. So it's 9 o'clock over here. You're late. And they hit you automatically with that $35, $50 late fee.
Yeah.
So that minimum payment should be nothing to you because you're going to pay it either way.
Yeah, because then your credit score went from like
Right.
50 points down.
Well, so that's another myth, actually. So do you guys actually know when it is considered a late reported on your credit report?
10 days later.
30 days.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So if you are late, if you don't make a payment, so that midnight time that I'm talking about, East Coast time, is just what they're going to charge you for.
That's just their program or their whatever.
What they're going to charge you for that late payment. It doesn't get reported as an actual late if you don't make a payment for 30 days. Then they mark it. So maybe one of these days I'll put up a sample of a credit report,
Right.
but you'll see 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, and they mark those. So if you don't pay your credit card bill for 60 days, that is different than a 30-day late, because now you're a whole 2 months behind. So the late fee, you can pay a late fee, go in there 5 days later and pay it, and still not have a late reported to your credit report.
Nice. I did not know that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I would really rather not encourage people to take that gamble.
Definitely not.
But again, it doesn't get reported or it doesn't impact your credit unless it's 30 days late. Now, what would happen to impact your credit, right? They're like, well, I didn't make a payment. I paid it after 5 days, but I still saw my credit go down. Well, what probably happened was whatever that balance was now reported. And it does go into that algorithm in calculating the score, right?
Don't check my algorithm.
Yeah.
Always set it for the minimum payment.
That's really smart.
Pay off your balances in full every month, and this avoids the interest payments and digging yourself further into debt. And I feel like, this is just kind of like the starter class I want to do on it. I want to dig deeper into some of these things later down in like another advanced type of class.
I will definitely let us know because I want to.
Because
this is stuff you don't learn anywhere else.
No,
You
no.
learn it by living it.
Correct.
And luckily, we have friends that are in the mortgage business that we can have conversations about and learn more stuff in depth. But classes like this are, I feel like, not just important for us as realtors or whatever, but just for everybody in general.
it's going to be huge for
Have you got
us.
friends in the mortgage industry?
Here. But I want to get more into when people, I feel like it's too vague, right? Digging yourself into credit card debt. drowning in interest. People don't actually know what that means and put into like number figures. So I want to be able to, in another class, unpack more of that. So this is where I don't practice this myself, but I feel like a lot of people should. In order to not get into this routine of credit card debt, you're allowed to make multiple payments a month. So if you get into that habit of every time you get paid, you pay off your credit card. Now your credit card bill is $2,000, $5,000 for the month. And you're like, oh man, after paying everything, I really only have $2,000 to put towards it. So now you're carrying that balance. If you spend it, if you put it on your credit card and you get paid, pay it off. Nobody's stopping you from multiple payments a month.
Right.
That's actually how I built my credit when I want to say like 2017, when I started getting into the journey of repaying or rebuilding my credit. My bank, I didn't have great credit. So my bank gave me a $500 limit. Well, I went and I spent the $500, I maxed it out, and it was connected to my bank. I bank with Chase. And I would go in and basically just pay it off. Then use the 500 again, because I was getting 1.5% back. And I was like, why wouldn't I put everything on my credit card? I spend this money anyways.
Exactly.
So that's like, going to grocery shopping and a trip to Marshall's for me. $500, boom, done. So when I first started, that's how I was building it. And after like a month or so, they're like, okay, we're just going to bump up her limit.
Which is exactly how you do it. And yeah, when I was doing really well, so I would do exactly what you're talking about, the multiple payments. So let's say I have my credit card, I go grocery shopping, I put it on the credit card, let's say that was $250. By the time I get to the car, before I drive off, I make the payment right then and there, because they don't know, they just know you're making a payment. They don't know that it's for the $250 you just spent on groceries or the $30 on gas. Because it's really easy to fall into the pattern where you're like, oh, you know what, I didn't make that payment immediately, so I have extra cash. Because you think you have extra cash, but really, if you're starting out and it's difficult for you to kind of pay it off all at the end, make those payments as you go, so that money is already deducted from your account and you don't have to make that big payment at the end.
Absolutely. And I feel too that goes into a more advanced type of budgeting and financial literacy. Because I'll tell you guys what I use my credit card for, and that's for me to track my spending. And what Ernesto just said, as long as you're conscientious and aware of what you're spending, you may not actually spend as much as you think. Whereas if you're blindly spending, it's easy, right? Credit card, beep, beep, beep. Now you just tap it, beep.
Well, and then you check your bank account and you're like, oh man, I still have whatever number in the
right.
Of course, because you haven't used your debit card, you used your credit card.
I pay my credit card once a month now. And I've gotten into my routine of how I budget and spend my money, right? And there have been times where I've opened up my credit card bill and I was, it's time to go in and pay. And I'm like, I got hacked. My credit card has been stolen. And so I go and I pull, I'm like, no, I'm going to dispute these erroneous charges. So I pull it up. And I go, oh, that was me. Yep, that was my Amazon. Oh, I sure did go to that restaurant, didn't I? Okay, none of this looks wrong. That really was me spending all of it. Holy smokes. So I've become more conscious of it. So I do try to get into the habit of opening up my credit card every couple of days a week, and I am aware of what I'm spending.
Is it the same system with a business card?
Absolutely.
Same thing.
It should be, right? Because I told you I have 2 credit cards that gets reported to my credit report. Actually, I have a 3rd for my business, and that one's specifically for buying everybody lunch and coffee, and so I keep that separate from my personal finances.
Right.
But it's another way of being aware of what it is that you spend.
So that goes on your
What's
credit.
our time? Oh,
That
almost.
goes on your credit too, because you vouch for that business
So-
LLC.
So from my understanding, and I don't want to speak incorrectly. So if I'm incorrect on this one, I would appreciate if anybody corrects me. Business credit cards do not get reported to your personal credit report.
Right.
But you are in the eyes of a lender. So if you had just recently opened up a business credit card or a credit card, you're still personally tied to it for
Yeah.
12 months.
Yeah.
So I would still hit your debt to income ratio if you had just opened up that card. But my card has been, or my business LLC consulting has been around for, I think, going on 3 years now. So personal liability, because the business has been financially responsible for it, it doesn't hit or show up on my credit report.
Gotcha.
I really want everybody to do your research. I get a lot of my information from personal experience, my job, but also I do my research as well in figuring out all of this stuff. So the more you understand how it works, the better you'll be at it. But I don't want people to focus and fixate so much on the little minor details of it, because it starts to get really confusing.
Right.
If you don't know exactly what you're doing, it gets confusing. You borrow money, you pay it back on time as agreed. Easy peasy.
Doesn't get much easier than
It
that.
doesn't get much easier. All of this,
Well, earning the money and all that stuff too.
but people earn money. It's how they spend it, I feel like, is where they start to struggle.
That's everybody's crutch.
Yeah, like everybody is, there is, you'd be surprised at how many people that I've consulted with, and I'm like, because I do ask for bank statements
Right.
when I'm doing my mortgage, and I'm like, okay, well, you need $200 a month of the bank statements that you've sent me. Is there anything that you can find? Can you find another $200, or can you find a way to cut back
Right.
$200 a month? And then we go through the bank statements together, and I'm like, wow, I actually eat out a lot. Wow, maybe I don't need all of those
Right.
subscriptions.
Right.
If you're aware of what you're spending your money on, you can better budget, which is what I like using credit cards for. I pay everything in full every month, but I also look at the statement. Gordon Ramsay or all those financial gurus will tell you, you go to the store, you write down what you spent, right?
Right, exactly.
Nobody has time for that. Nobody carries around, my purse is like this big. I don't carry around a notebook to write down all of the money that I spent. I'm not going to write down $5 for a cup of coffee that I spent.
That's where American Express comes in handy, because they, what do you call it? State everything different,
Exactly.
different descriptions.
Yeah. So maintaining it, just ensure that you never make a late payment. We've talked about this. After 30 days late, that's when it's reported to your credit report. You want to keep your utilization. If you do carry a balance, you want about 10 to 30% of the limit that you're allowed. And they actually look at the overall limit, just so you guys know. It could be $10,000 accumulated over 5 credit cards. If every single credit card's balance is reported, this would be the utilization that they're counting. So you can have a $500 credit card with a $500 balance, and then you have a $10,000 credit card with a 0 balance. That utilization is below 10 to 30%. The overall utilization, not individual.
Gotcha.
So the longer the longer the history you have of your credit, the higher credit score would be. Hence the history of it. Only apply for the credit that you need. A lot of people will just, I feel like anybody and everybody could get a credit card, right? It's really not that hard anymore. Just because they give it to you doesn't mean that you have to apply for it or spend it. Kind of the same thing, only use credit that you need. We can break down how much a pair of shoes actually cost you if you put it on a credit card, if you keep carrying that balance.
Right, yeah.
That's fine. Buy a pair of shoes on a credit card, paid it off in full. Otherwise, that $500 pair of shoes now would cost you $550, $600 if you're carrying that balance. Check and monitor your credit report often. So this is going to be one I tell you guys in another slideshow. So we only have a couple minutes, so I kind of want to burn through this. Financial literacy. I love the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It kind of gives you a really good mindset into it. Then you have, so this YouTube from, it was MS or CNBC, they actually do a really good video on using credit cards or credit card hacking. Basically, they kind of say the same thing. Use a credit, pay it off in full, and you reap the benefits. If you carry that balance and you pay that interest, well, that 1.5% that you're getting back in cash really doesn't mean anything when you're paying 26%. So monitoring your credit. I love Credit Karma. Credit Karma is going to be soft inquiry. I think it's Experian and TransUnion. They only report 2. So a hard inquiry is when all 3 are pulled at the same time. Soft inquiry is going to be 1 or 2 out of the 3 bureaus, but it gives you an idea of where you're at. It gives you a good idea of where you're at. You are allowed 1 tri-merge report by law so that you understand where your credit is at. So between the 3 bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, you can actually go to www.annualcreditreport.com for a free tri-merge credit report. I'll send it to you, Tony.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll text it to you. I like the Budgetista. I know this has nothing to do with credit, but she actually does a lot of really good videos on budgeting and financing. And she makes it kind of fun. And then you can also follow me on YouTube and Instagram. And so we go through kind of the frequently asked questions, but we'll kind of burn through. And one I really want to kind of go over is, if I'm not borrowing money from a potential employer, why do they want to know my credit score? Really? Because credit, for better or for worse, is an indication of your character. And that it kind of sucks to have to be reduced to that number, right? But this is going to be something we're going to unpack in another kind of like
Show.
Conversation point, is that if you were borrowing money and paying it back on time, it indicates that your character is that you are good for your word, right? And then, but why else would an employer want to know what your credit score is? Whether or not you are a liability to them. So not all jobs. Certain jobs do want to know what your credit score is. So I'm going to throw an example out there. We are here in the Las Vegas area. Huge. Our number 1 employer is the casino industry.
Right.
If you are in a position where you handle money and you don't have the greatest credit score, or you are strapped for money, or you know what I mean, like, they may not allow you to be in that money handling position because of that. Same thing with law enforcement and security, military. If you did not have a good credit score or hurting financially, you may be a liability in the sense that you're guarding a high profile group or individual, and somebody wants to hurt them. And if you're strapped for cash,
They can bribe you.
they can bribe you. Hey,
How much do you want?
take a break for $10,000. Go take a 5-minute restroom break at this time. You can be bribed.
Like right now, this second, because I'm ready.
I want $1 million.
And so that really is the end of it. I'm going to end the streaming here.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
I'm going to sit on the other side.